Him we proclaim, admonishing everyone and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone mature in Christ. These are the words of the Apostle Paul, sent by Jesus to make mature disciples for Jesus. The Group Chat Podcast exists to make disciples who love Jesus, His church, and His world. Welcome.
All right, we're back for another episode of the Group Chat Podcast. We're continuing to look at the doctrine of God, who He is, and what He's like. It's Pastor James hosting once again today. I'm joined by Pastor Josh. Hello. Pastor Joe.
Very thankful to be here.
And Pastor Doug.
Hi.
And
I don't like going last. What do you say? Like, somebody's already said hello. Somebody else already said, glad to be here. What do you say? Heyo. Nice to see you.
Howdy.
Glad to be here. If somebody already said that.
I'm going to say something Greek.
So high.
Last time I was on the podcast, I said, much obliged. Every time. So,
ridiculous.
That's an option.
Joe's embraced his folks.
Folksy switch is broken on Joe.
You don't see the 10-gallon hat on my head, but I tip it every time.
Folksy Joe.
Howdy, Joe. It's good to have you here. As well as the rest of you who are listening in. We're continuing through the doctrine of God, and last time we made the distinction between God's substance, and that He's pure substance, and that He has attributes that are necessary to who He is. We're going to start walking through some of those attributes of God, and those have been distinguished into incommunicable and communicable. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not we can talk about them. It's a matter of which ones that we can imitate, which ones have been communicated to us in terms of ones that we share. So today we're talking about the things, the ways in which we are not like God, that He is unlike us, His incommunicable attributes. And so we want to spend some time defining some of those incommunicable attributes, but also talking about why these things are wonderful news to us. So let's start by talking about what theologians call God's aseity and infinity. God's aseity and infinity. What are those things? Why do they matter? All that.
Aseity is, if I'm not mistaken, and I know I'm sitting here with the Latin guru, so I got to be careful, but I think it's from ase, which is like from himself.
Is that right, Joe?
Right.
Yeah, I didn't want to be intimidating, but yeah, it does mean from self.
That's it, from
I think
self.
Joe was saying it's from Foghorn Leghorn. I say.
Oh, man, that is a deep cut.
That was nice.
Wasn't me,
Yeah.
Joe.
No, that's right. He does mean that.
That's right. So he said you could phrase it differently. You could say he's not contingent upon anything, self-existent. That there's nothing. We've used the phrase before, like God is the uncaused cause. He's the first mover, whatever you may want to call it. There's nothing behind Him. There's nothing beyond Him. He's not dependent on something else.
Nothing propping Him up.
Nothing propping Him up. Like so aseity is actually is really a foundational idea about who God is.
There's a great little talk that Sinclair Ferguson, he's a Scottish pastor, does in his podcast. Is it called
Things Unseen?
Things Unseen. Yeah.
It's very good.
Great
and when
podcast.
he gets to the one on Exodus 3, it's fantastic. And he's just meditating on God's aseity, right? His self-existence,
His I amness.
and he talks about how the bush that was on fire is a parable, a moving picture of what that is like for God. He's got this great bit. I can't do it in the Scottish, but the bush, he says, the bush was burning.
It was burning.
He goes, it was burning.
I won't do it. I'll do it.
I can't do all
Don't
of
make
it.
me
I'll
do
just
it,
do
but I
part
won't
of
do
it. All right.
Okay, fine, I'll do it.
The bush was burning, but it wasn't burned up. The fire was in the midst of the bush, but the bush wasn't the fuel that kept the fire going. The fire was self-propagating. It didn't need the bush for its existence. The fire was independent, uncaused, in need of nothing, sufficient in itself, constant in its light and heat. A fire that simply burns, uncreated fire.
That's good.
And I love that. It's a great picture of what we're talking about when we talk about God's aseity. Nobody made God. God doesn't have needs. He doesn't die in 3 days if he doesn't drink water.
Yeah, it's incommunicable to us because we depend on so much for our existence, not only in our creation that we came from something other than ourselves, but also the fact that we are sustained by something other than ourselves.
And that will
someone
never
other than
change.
ourselves.
Even in glorified bodies, even in the new creation, we don't become ase. We don't all of a sudden become from ourselves.
That's right. And all this is the bedrock, the source of so much goodness of who God is. Like even just the fact that God can provide for us, that He does provide to us life and breath and every good thing. Mm-hmm. The reason why He can provide those things is because He's, so to speak, an infinite source. At the end of the day, if I want to give good gifts to my children, at some point I tap the limit on that. I only
The bank account runs dry.
I only have what I have been given, what I can get access to. But God is just infinite source. And so even his capacity to provide for us, create us, sustain us, give us good things, it's all owed to the fact that he is self-existent and depends on nothing.
That's really good. Another way this doctrine is beautiful and wonderful is that it completely changes how you think about why you're here. I remember when I was in college, somebody doing a little devotional on, it might have been Genesis 2, and God looks at Adam and says, it's not good for the man to be alone. And then that person said, I wonder if God looked at the world and said, it's not good for me to be alone. And I was like, that's the record screech moment. No, actually, no, that's not why we're here. God wasn't lonely, right? Within the Trinity, there's a fullness of fellowship, joy, love, all of that kind of stuff. But that's important, because if God made this world because he's needy,
right,
then that means that he created you to meet a need in him.
It means there's some lack in him.
There's some lack in him, and that your whole purpose is
to fill in God's gaps.
To fill, right? What? And so, but if God isn't needy, and he's not, then when he made this world, you're not here because he needed you. You're here because he wanted you. And there's something powerful about being wanted, even if you're not needed, right? It means it's the overflow of love that says, I want to share myself with you. Right. So I will create a world in which you exist so that you can know me, enjoy me, be blessed by me, and so on. And so that's what Revelation 4 says. It's by your will, your desire, that all these things were created, not by your need, not by your lack, for he has no need, he has no lack, but from the overflow of his goodness and his desire to bless and this fountain of love that never runs dry, he created people that he wanted to be here so he could share himself with us.
Hey guys, Pastor James here. Group Chat Podcast is a ministry of Remnant Church in Richmond, Virginia. Remnant Church recently launched our 1 million in 1 year campaign to fund the purchase of properties that will serve as ministry space, a third location for worship, as well as classrooms for New City Academy. If you are a member of Remnant Church, remember to be praying about how to dig deep and joyfully and sacrificially give to the 1 million in 1 year campaign. Even if you aren't a member, if you have benefited from the Group Chat podcast or have been blessed by the ministry of Remnant Church, consider partnering with us by contributing to the 1 million in 1 year campaign. To find out more, check out some videos of what God has been doing in our midst, and to make your pledge, click on the link in the show notes. Yeah, that's good. And related to God's self-sufficiency, his aseity, is his infinity, that there are no limits on God. And there are different angles on that. God's infinity as it relates to himself, as he relates to time, as it relates to space. And so what are we talking about when we're talking about God's infinity from those different angles?
Yeah, well, one of the things that it means when we say that God is infinite is in relation to time, in that he's not constrained by time in the way that we are.
Yeah, from everlasting to everlasting, he is God.
Yeah, that's right. I think the Psalm 90, first couple of verses, which is, we could go into all the implications of that. It's beautiful and glorious, as Doug was kind of elucidating, last couple minutes. But yeah, he's not constrained in the way that we are.
Yeah, we think about the limits of time. I mean, even one of the exercises that we sometimes perform imaginatively is like, man, if I had a time machine, it's like, because the past is back there and it's determined so much, it's fixed. If I'm, on a chain smoker for 40 years, and that catches up with me, it's like, man, that past has an impact on my present that I can't go back and fix. It's a constraint on me, or even just not knowing the future. And so the fact that God is outside of time, that he's not constrained by existing moment to moment, but that he can relate to all moments in a way that is infinite, in a way that's sovereign, in a way that's wise. Time is a huge constraint on us. We feel it all the time. And so it also describes his infinity, describes how he relates to space. Oftentimes we'll talk about his omnipresence, that we are constrained to one specific location, and sometimes even fantasize, man, if I could be at two places at once. I was trying to catch up with some work yesterday. I was like, man, if there were two of me, one of them could be working on this task and another one could be working on this task, I could get a lot done.
That would be great.
And so the fact that God's not constrained to space is huge. Josh, you had a great observation about the recent Superman movie that you went to go see.
Oh, yeah.
So I went with some of my
my bros and watched the new Superman movie. We had a great time, and we were talking about it afterwards. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but I had a great time. And I was like, I think I finally get the Superman hype. Like that was basically my take on the movie was I get the Superman hype now, and I didn't before. And in some ways, the reason I didn't before is because I said it doesn't really make for a great plot. I said there's not a whole lot of tension because he's so powerful. Like that was the thought. Superman is so strong. He's so powerful. How are you supposed to create any tension? He's the strongest, fastest. He has all these powers. He can fly. He can shoot lasers out of his eyes, and so he's gonna win. Whatever. And then it's like, oh no, kryptonite. It's like, what else are you gonna do? But then it was my friend Cody actually brought this up. I thought it was a great insight. He said, so it's not original to me, but he said the tension is that he's not omnipresent. So that is the tension, that he's a kind of divine-like a character that is incarnate. And so though he is extremely powerful and nobody can beat him, he cannot be in two places at once. And so there's this part in the movie, without spoiling it, where there's two things happening. There's one thing happening in Metropolis, the main city. There's one thing happening in another country, almost on the other side of the world, if you will.
And he has almost like a hint, a hint of omniscience because he can hear everything that's going on. So there's a broad awareness.
He's aware of these things. So the tension actually is the fact that he can't be in both of those places at the same time. So he has to. It actually does introduce all kinds of great moral dilemmas and ethical conundrums because they can make for a good story. So all that to say, God is better than Superman.
Yeah, it's like even if you have all these superpowers, even if you're powerful, being constrained to one place, being limited, being finite, not infinite in terms of space, actually is a huge constraint, even for somebody who has all these powers. And
I remember one of my professors in seminary when he was talking about this, the infinity of God in relation to space, which we would normally call omnipresence. He really helped me understand what we mean and what we don't mean by that. To understand what we don't mean by that is we don't mean that, oh gosh, this is
Go for
a
it.
little debased, but when I was in elementary school in the early 90s, your mama jokes were a huge thing, right? So people would always, and it was always your mom's fat.
Careful.
Right? Your mama is so fat,
Careful.
she's on the Save the Whales poster, stuff like that. One of them
Classic.
said, your mama's so fat, when she jumps in the air, she gets stuck. Well, when we, right, it's ridiculous. It's
remember.
ridiculous.
It's not
You
even
remember
funny.
it?
I remember. It's not making me
Not even
laugh.
funny, but kind of funny.
hilarious.
Here's the thing. When we talk about God's omnipresence, we don't mean that he's so fat that he fills the universe in that way.
Right.
Because like we said last time, God is pure, maybe not last time, one of the previous episodes, he's pure spirit. And so it's not like
Not the force.
His matter is everywhere.
That's right. So what do we mean? Well, what we mean is that he's able to accomplish his will at every point in the universe. The way the psalmist talks about God's omnipresence, his infinity in relation to space, is he says, where can I go to escape your spirit?
Psalm 139.
If I ascend to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths of Sheol, behold, you are there. And the way you would say that to someone in terms of why does this matter practically, it means there's nowhere that you could run if you're a rebel to get beyond the arm of God to judge and bring justice and all of that. But it also means to those who are repentant sinners, there's nowhere that you can stumble that would be beyond the reach of his saving help, his grace, and so on. And this is how the Bible teaches us to think about the infinity of God. There is no Superman dilemma. He doesn't ever have to choose between helping this person, helping that person. He is able to accomplish his will at every point in the universe.
Which is important because you do have different heretical strands that put limitations on God in terms of whether or not he is everywhere, whether or not he knows everything, if he's just kind of finding things out in sequence the way that we are. And in terms of his capacity to save, his capacity to judge rightly, I mean, this has huge impact on God doing the wonderful deeds of God, whether or not he has this kind of infinity. Related to all that, we have also the fact that he's infinite in and of himself, that all of what God is, he is ad infinitum, that he is an overflowing fountain of all that he is, in such a way that you can't kick the keg on who God is, which when you start to talk about some of his communicable attributes, his love, his wisdom, his patience, all of these things, it means that he never runs out of being who he is. And that's a huge reassurance to the Christian who is always counting on God to be God in all of his attributes.
I recently, I apologized to my kids one day. It's like a long day at work, had a bunch of meetings, had to deal with you guys all day, and then
God bless you.
God bless me. And then I got home and And it was just classic. You know, it was like, had to cut the grass, had to do something else. And next thing you know, I literally have like the lights, it's dark. I'm finishing up the yard work, and it started raining. And I was like, this is just nuts.
How long, oh Lord?
How long, oh Lord? How long, oh Lord? So anyway, I was just not in a great mood. And so I came in, and I didn't lose it. This is a good story in the end, in a sense. I didn't lose it. And I came in, and I literally warned the family. I said, I need you guys to know something. I kicked the keg, so to speak.
You're spent.
I was like, I'm not mad. You guys haven't done anything. Forgive me if I'm like overstepping, but I'm walking. I always say, my dad used to say, walking on thin ice. I was like, I'm spent.
My ice is getting thin.
Just be patient with me. You know, like that's what I was like, be patient with me and help me make it through the rest of this evening, because I'm gassed. That does not exist for God.
Can't spend them. Infinite fountain. No, that's good.
I'll just say real quick, some of the good news here that I just can't help but continue thinking about since the Superman example is it's in a sense, it's great that these aren't communicable, to us, and that's God, not us. And it really goes poorly when we try to act that way. So when you were talking about Superman can like hear everything and whatever, I didn't see the movie, but my invite got lost in the mail. Never heard of Superman, but he can hear what's going on, whatever, across the world. That would be torture to us, who could hear every troublesome thing and not be able to do anything about it. But the world we live in, the modern world with social media, 24-hour news cycle,
it gives a sense of
tempts us, to try to be God in these ways that we can't be, And so I don't know, I just find it very comforting that I actually can't be that, so we don't have to try to be that. So I actually lean into not being able to be God in these ways.
Right, we have limits. God doesn't. Right. God has no limits.
That's a good thing.
God needs no limits.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Let's talk about God's simplicity and immutability. What are we talking about? When we say God's simple, we say, it's just like, he just kind of wears it on his sleeve. It's not much to him. I don't know, when we think about a simple person, that's not necessarily a compliment always. So what do we mean when we say that God is simple, and why does that matter?
Well, we talked about this a little in another episode, but it's worth talking about here, because when we talk about the simplicity of God, we mean that he's not like a bowl of cereal like Lucky Charms, where it's made up of different parts. There's a certain amount of marshmallows, there's a certain amount of whatever the crunchy bits are.
And the red balloons.
Right, exactly. And you're like, well, this bowl had 7 balloons, and this one had some more lucky stars, and there's more of one thing than... That's not how it is. All that God is, he is all of those things. And they're not in conflict with each other. So it's not... there's no balancing act in the person of God. So it's not like... Well, I'm loving, but I'm also just, and I'm having a hard time
figure out how to juggle that.
Figuring out how to juggle these two things, because I want to be loving to this person, but I also want to be just. So what do I do? And there are ways that people talk about God sometimes that make it seem like they think that's what's going on. Like he has this conflict in his being, and he's like, it's hard for me to figure out what to do here.
Stephen Furtick famously, stupidly said that God broke the law to save us. Like that was the whole point.
For love.
He broke the law for love. That he says like when my son broke his arm and I broke the speed limit to get him to the hospital. So God broke the law for love, kind of thing. And it's pitting these attributes of God against one another, and actually then denigrates the glory of what actually happened at the cross.
Mm-hmm. So this is a corollary to God's oneness that we talked about in previous episodes, just the unity that there is in God. And you think about just even our experience of the complexity of having parts and passions and the conflict and contradictions that can happen there. I mean, just think about all the different places where your head and your heart are at war with one another, or even just the struggle in Romans 7 that is articulated, the very thing I want to do is not the thing
Just conflicting desires in general.
Yeah, you're just at
I want to eat this food. I also want to be fit. I want to be,
at war
whatever.
with yourself, which can only happen if there are multiple, so to speak, parties involved, multiple parts involved that can conflict with one another. And the truth of the scriptures is God, because of his unity, is simple, and everything within him coheres and is on the same page.
Perfectly.
So God is never conflicted. He's never at odds with himself. He never has to overcome one, so to speak, part of himself in order to leverage another part. That God moves fully in full unity in all that he is. It's actually a wonderful thing. What are we talking about when we talk about God's immutability?
Immutable is just or immutability is
You
just
can't silence him.
That's it. You can't mute him.
No mute button,
That's
baby.
funny. That's good.
That is also true.
That's not what it means.
You
But
can't
that's not what
silence
that
him, but
means.
it's a fancy way of just saying he doesn't change. The same root where it's like mutate. You can't. God can't be changed. And again, there's so much significance there. We talk about that often. There's a lot of different verses that we can bring out. But one of the things I think why that's very important is because as we talk about the nature of God, these attributes reflecting who He is. If He changes, then it means He either was something worse than He is and is now perfect, or He was perfect and He's now not
Is
perfect.
either getting better or worse.
He's either getting better or worse. There is, and then again, people could argue, what if He changes and it's parallel? I'm saying, but it's something different. And the point is, if He is perfect, if He is God, then something different is not God.
That's right.
So either He wasn't God and became God, or He is God. So the immutability is in relation to who God is extremely important.
One of the things worth pointing out here is that these doctrines have consequences. They
Exactly.
matter. But we don't believe them because we dislike the consequences of them being false. We believe them first and foremost because God says this about Himself. He says in Hebrews 13:18, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He says, 13:8, and then he says in, is it Numbers 23, is that where God says God does not change? He's not like a man that He should lie, or son of man that He should change His mind. There is no shadow of turning with Thee, we sing in one of our songs. That's all true. So we believe it because the Bible teaches it. But then we want to talk about why it matters. It matters because there are people who think, well, God's learning. He's growing. He's evolving. He's getting better all the time.
Process theology.
Right. And what that means is actually at some point in the past, that means He wasn't good.
Right.
But He is good now. And they kind of like that because it lets them sort of ignore some of the tough parts of the Bible that they don't like. But then that also means they just haven't thought through this.
It always strangely reflects whatever our hobby horse is.
Of course
the
it
day.
does. But I was take it to the future. If what they believed is true, not only would the Bible be false, but also that would mean the God they're speaking to now isn't all that good either. He's got a lot more improving to do.
Well,
that's a horrifying idea.
Yeah, the rest of that hymn you're quoting, "Great is Thy faithfulness," goes on to say, "Thou changest not, Thy compassions they fail not."
That's right.
Great is Thy faithfulness. And
Lord,
Can
that's
you
amazing.
imagine if God did change? We're banking on all these promises, all this gospel, all this good news, all this grace, and even His justice, and we show up at the final hour, the last moment, the last day, and God says,
Changed my mind.
That's where I was at. I've decided to be unjust
Right.
and not
His
merciful.
love endures forever. What psalm is that says His love endures forever between every line? His love endures forever. His love endures forever. And He's like, not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah.
It endured mostly of ever, but not forever.
Yeah, so Malachi 3:6, great verse that takes both the immutability of God and then shows you why it's applicable, relevant, beautiful, important for you. God says, "For I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore, you are not consumed or destroyed."
That's right.
Right? Isn't that great? Because if you did change, then it would be like, well,
I'm tired of y'all today.
I used to be forgiving.
I am tired of y'all today.
I'm tired of y'all today.
That's right.
I used to be loving, but not anymore.
Yeah, and so much of our life is banking on this kind of consistency. So even the passage that we cited from Numbers 23, verse 19, God is not a man that He should lie. That he does what He says, or it goes on to say, or a son of man that He should change His mind. Has He said, and He will not do it? And so even the immutability of God being the basis of His promises, that He makes promises He will not change. So His decrees will not change, His plans will not change, His promises will come to pass. And you think about all the different ways in which we have bet our lives on God's promises coming to pass. Whether it be the promises that He's going to come through with us, He'll never leave us or forsake us, the fact that He'll reward us, the fact that
He'll make all things new.
Make all things new. We're banking on a ton of promises that if God changes, all of a sudden those things evaporate, and all of this life in Christ is for naught. And so it's wonderful news that God doesn't change. Finally, let's talk about God's impassibility. What is this? This doctrine says that God doesn't suffer, which, I mean, there's some questions that come up there.
I was going to say, when you're racing him, you can't pass him.
That's right.
What I was going to say.
That's right. On your left.
I was thinking about making that joke.
Impassibility. God's
On your
the
left.
fastest sports car.
I was thinking about making that joke, and I was like, that's not very funny.
Also true. Like
not
the
very
mute
funny.
button, but not what it means. What are we talking about with impassibility?
Yeah, it comes from the Greek word that can mean to suffer, but it can also refer to what we would call
It's the same way we get our word passion.
the passions,
the passion of
or the
Christ.
emotions, right? The
thing.
suffering of Christ, the passion of Christ, right? But then we used to use the word suffer like that in English. If you read older things, I suffer not such and such to happen, right? So what we're talking about when we talk about God's impassibility is that we mean that God does not possess emotions as reactions in the same way that we do.
Right, that's key.
Okay, so for example,
reactions.
I'm not mad right now, but somebody could do something in a moment
You could
that
be provoked.
that could make me mad, right? And that way of thinking about God is wrong for several reasons. One of them being he already knows all things. So he's never in a position of having to react anyway. It's not like he's like, well, I didn't see that one coming,
That's right.
and now
You're
I'm
gonna
mad
surprise
about it.
him, you know.
I'm surprised. There's that. But furthermore, this would actually also posit a change in God if we were to say, well, his emotional states of being can change and fluctuate and so on. But somebody who's listening to this might say, yeah, but we read in the Bible that he's angry with sin or angry.
Right.
That's correct. But that wasn't a change that came about.
Yep.
It wasn't like I'm not angry, somebody sins, now I am angry, and my whole emotional state of being has changed. It's more like because of the kind of God that he is, he has a settled disposition towards certain things in the world, a settled disposition of wrath toward that which is dishonorable and ungodly and harmful and unjust. He has a settled disposition to bless and love and care for all those who cast themselves on his mercy and humility and so forth. But those things aren't changes in God. They just describe the way this kind of God would relate to us when we change in one place or another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it makes me think of that recent book by Joe Rigney, Leadership and Emotional Sabotage, where he talks about the dynamic of emotional steering, that somebody can respond to me in such a way that either in their emotions or in their words or actions can provoke emotions in me that make me change the course that I would have gone otherwise. That in a lot of ways, these kinds of passions can put a steering wheel on my back, that I can be manipulated. And so this idea that God's not reactive in that kind of way means that God can't be steered, which is wonderful news because it means that he only ever does what he intends to do.
Yeah.
It's not that he was intending to do one thing, but then the way
You
that
made
we
him
respond
so
to
mad
him,
that he lost control.
Right, exactly. And so he's always in control. He always is doing only what he means to do. And since what he means to do is good, is just, is gracious, is merciful, it's a wonderful thing that he can't be steered in that way.
And none of that means this is important. None of that means he's emotionless. Like we just talk about feelings, emotions, where we don't have a lot of times divide them up rightly. I like the Puritans used to separate a lot of times the passions from the affections. And I'm not saying that's airtight, but that idea like God has affections. God is, to your point, Doug, he is angry at sin. He's wrathful against sin.
In such a way that when the Bible says that he's loving, that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that there's not a temperature to that. It's just like, well, conceptually, I love you. You know?
Exactly. That's my point. It's like it's tempting to be like, okay, well, I guess if God has neither parts nor passions, like he didn't really care that much. And it's like, no. We just mean things don't come upon him. That it's a settled disposition, a settled affection that comes out of God. So it's not that he's emotionless, but to your point, far better, it's that his emotions are utterly predictable based upon an unchanging God. That's who he is.
And even when we're talking about emotions, we mentioned analogical language a couple episodes ago.
That's good, Joe.
And it's it's helpful to think that when we, like you said, he's not passionless as if he feels nothing. But when we talk about God feeling anything, it's not in the same way that we feel it. So it's similar to when we talk about God having hands. His hands don't look exactly like my hands.
Right.
That's what's the fancy word? Anthropomorphism, where we're talking about, like that. And that's you can do that emotionally too. Anthropopathism, which is fun and probably a word I'm never going to say ever again.
But yes, yeah.
But point is, we're kind of ascribing emotions to God, and it's just not in the same way, that we ascribe it to ourselves.
If you want to talk about why this matters practically, I mean, there's a lot of things we've already touched on. There was a man who used to pastor a very large church in Michigan before he became heretic and eventually left the church, left the faith, and he was being interviewed on public news, like a large, broadcasting, CNN, something like that, about these things. And they were like, what is the basis of your theology now? Because if you move beyond the Bible, what is it? And he said,
how'd you get squirrely?
yeah. And he said, but that wasn't what they were asking,
they
right?
weren't asking.
And he said, well, my theology begins with the belief that whenever I shed a tear, God sheds a tear, which is insane. It's an insane way, but a lot of people probably would think in that way. Whatever makes me sad.
It sounds
So
sweet.
cute.
It sounds
Whatever
sweet.
makes me sad,
So
obviously
cute.
makes God sad. And they would also, if you press them on it and take it a step further and be like, and he's sad in the same way that I'm sad about it. But that's not true. He's not caught off guard by this. So you're sad because something happens that you don't like. But actually, it could be a good thing. If I get a ticket, I'm sad about it, mad about it, but it doesn't mean that it was unjust. If I was going 50 miles an hour over the speed limit in the residential zone,
Right.
that would be just, even though I would feel mad about it.
You were being impassable.
God's yeah, that's right, dude. No kid on a bike could pass me that day. But that's not how it is with the Lord. He and furthermore, there are ways that we are sad where we're sad because we can't do anything about something that we don't like that's happened to us. God is never sad in that way,
Right.
because it's not like, man, this breaks my heart and I can do nothing about it except cry. That's not the case.
Think about
for
the
him.
difference of Jesus at the grave or the tomb of Lazarus. So Jesus weeps,
And yet,
knowing he's about to raise Lazarus from the dead.
Correct.
And so I think it's a great illustration to your point, Doug, about that God's impassible is not that he's emotionless. It simply means he's not crying like we're crying. Can you imagine that? If it's like, oh man, this situation is terrible. What am I going to do about it? And you're crying, and God's like, I don't know. What are we going to do about it? And he's crying with you. That's actually not comforting at all. It's far better to know that he can do something about it and has in Christ.
Which is the point of a lot of these incommunicable attributes. They highlight the greatness of God,
Yeah.
that he is self-sufficient, that he is never ending and not constrained by anything, that he doesn't change, and that he can't be manipulated. And if we are going to rest our lives on the rock of a God, that's the kind of God that we want, a great God who isn't subject to all these things, constrained by all these things, moved and controlled by all of these things. And so that's the kind of great God that we have. We also have a very good God.
Amen.
We'll see that in our conversation about communicable attributes, but we'll pick that up on the next episode. So see you guys for it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Group Chat Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and check out the links below if you're interested in more. Until next time, grace and peace.